The stars were never kind to humanity. When the United Galactic Federation discovered Earth, they deemed humanity unfit for integration. Too aggressive, too unpredictable, too emotional. They placed sanctions forbidding trade, colonization, or technological aid. The verdict was clear. Humanity was to remain stranded on its dying homeworld, a species doomed to rot in the shadow of greater civilizations. But the Federation underestimated one thing: humanity's refusal to die quietly. Earth was suffocating. Resources dwindled, wars over scraps intensified, and the Federation stood back, watching like indifferent gods. They had the power to help, but they had already decided. Humanity was not worth saving. But in the darkest corners of the world, in underground bunkers and hidden laboratories, a different future was being written. Brilliant minds, scientists, engineers, hackers, and warlords came together, driven by one purpose: survival. They scavenged technology from black market dealers, reverse-engineered alien systems, and pushed their own sciences beyond limits. The Federation believed Earth was locked in isolation. They were wrong. In the silence of space, forgotten stations and derelict ships became humanity's first strongholds. Smugglers, mercenaries, and outcasts joined their ranks, bound not by nationality but by purpose. They became the Ghost Fleet, a hidden armada that operated in the darkness between the stars. Their weapons were outdated compared to Federation standards. Their ships were cobbled together from stolen scraps. But they were human, and that meant they adapted, they endured, and most importantly, they struck where it hurt the most. For years, the Federation never knew who was raiding their supply lines, disrupting their communications, and stealing classified technology. By the time they realized, it was too late. Humanity was no longer confined to Earth. They had built an empire in the shadows. On the bridge of the Iron Revenant, Admiral Darius Kane stood with his hands behind his back, staring at the vastness of space. His fleet, a ghost armada of human warships, drifted like silent predators in the dark, waiting for the signal to strike. Their target was Vortan 5, a resource world vital to the Federation's economy. If humanity wanted to send a message, this was the place. A soft chime rang through the bridge. "Admiral," said Lieutenant Reyes, her voice calm but firm. "Federation patrols are moving into the sector, just as predicted." Kane allowed himself a small smile. "Good," he said. "Then it's time they learned why rejecting humanity was their greatest mistake." The Iron Revenant hung in the void, its darkened hull absorbing the distant glow of Vortan 5's twin suns. Around it, the Ghost Fleet remained hidden, engines cold, weapons primed, waiting for the moment to strike. Admiral Darius Kane watched the enemy fleet move into position. Federation patrols were predictable, efficient but complacent. They relied on their superior technology and numbers, believing no one could challenge them. They had never fought humans who had nothing left to lose. "Status?" Kane asked. Lieutenant Reyes checked the tactical display. 3 heavy cruisers, 6 frigates, and 2 carrier escorts. Their shields are down, standard peacetime formation. They don't suspect a thing. A dark chuckle rumbled from Kane's throat. "They will soon." With a nod, he gave the order. A single burst signal pulsed through the void, a silent whisper in the dark, and the shadows came alive. From the darkness, human warships surged forward. Cloaked fighters, their engines running cold until the last second, ignited in blue streaks of fire as they screamed toward the unsuspecting fleet. Silent torpedoes, designed to evade standard sensor detection, struck first, smashing into the Federation cruisers before their shields could power up. Explosions erupted across the enemy formation, and chaos followed. "Unknown hostiles engaging. Shields up!" The Federation officers barely had time to react before the Ghost Fleet tore into them. Kane's fleet didn't fight like the Federation. There were no drawn-out engagements, no prolonged tactical standoffs. Humanity had learned the art of war the hard way, through desperation, through survival. The Iron Revenant fired its rail cannons, sending hyper-dense slugs through the first frigate's hull. The ship crumpled, its reactor going critical in a silent, fiery explosion. Federation ships scrambled to return fire, but the Ghost Fleet was already among them, moving with terrifying precision. Stealth corvettes weaved between capital ships, planting boarding charges. Human commandos, soldiers forged in the hell of Earth's wars, breached enemy vessels, cutting down Federation officers before they could even draw their sidearms. On the bridge of a Federation cruiser, Admiral Thesic of the Federation's 3rd Patrol Fleet watched in horror. This can't be possible," he muttered. A lieutenant turned to him, her face pale. "Sir, we're being overrun. We don't even know who they are." Thesic clenched his fists. He knew. There was only one species with this level of reckless defiance. "Humans," he spat. On the Iron Revenant, Kane watched as the Federation fleet crumbled. Ships burned, enemy crews surrendered, and Vorton 5's orbital defenses fell into silence. Reyes turned to him. "Orders, sir?" Kane took a slow breath. "Send a message," he said. The transmission echoed across the system, hijacking every Federation frequency. "You cast us out. You abandoned us. You thought humanity was finished. You were wrong. We are the Ghost Fleet. We are the darkness between the stars. And we have returned." Far across the galaxy, in the heart of the Federation's capital, the message played before the High Council. For the first time in centuries, fear crept into their eyes. Humanity was no longer beneath their notice. Humanity was at war. The Ghost Fleet had struck its first blow, and the Federation reeled from the shock. Vorton 5, a planet once considered untouchable, now lay in human hands. The station defenses had fallen, its orbital shipyards had been seized, and Federation survivors were either dead or prisoners. But Kane knew this was only the beginning. The Federation was arrogant, but it wasn't weak. It had fleets that spanned the stars, worlds covered in fortress cities, and an army drawn from 1,000 species. Now that humanity had shown its hand, the full weight of the galaxy would come crashing down upon them, which was exactly what Kane wanted. In the command center of the Iron Revenant, Lieutenant Reyes analyzed intercepted Federation transmissions. The enemy was panicking. Reports of the attack spread like wildfire, and the High Council had already ordered a response. "They're mobilizing the 6th Armada," Reyes said. "At least 60 warships, including dreadnoughts." A murmur ran through the command crew. The Federation didn't send dreadnoughts for minor skirmishes. This was an extermination order. Kane smirked. "Perfect." Commander Locke, Kane's chief strategist, stepped forward. "Sir, we can't take on an entire armada head-on. Even with Vorton 5's resources, we're still outgunned." Kane leaned forward, his eyes glinting with something dangerous. "We don't need to win a battle," he said. "We need to win a war." The Ghost Fleet didn't fight conventionally. They were insurgents, saboteurs, ghosts in the void. If the Federation thought this would be a simple fleet engagement, they were walking into a trap. Kane turned to Reyes. "Send out the signal. It's time to activate the sleeper cells." Across Federation space, humanity had not been idle. The Federation believed they had isolated Earth, but humans had been slipping through the cracks for decades, posing as traders, mercenaries, engineers. They had wormed their way into shipyards, intelligence bureaus, and military outposts. They had listened, learned, and waited. And now, the waiting was over. On the industrial world of Belthar 9, a human engineer working on a Federation battleship inserted a simple command into the ship's AI. When the Sixth Armada jumped to warp, its supply lines would accidentally be sent to the wrong coordinates, stranding half its fleet in deep space. On the fortress planet Xiphos Prime, a human scientist in a classified weapons lab triggered a chain reaction in the Federation's prototype plasma cannons. The resulting explosion destroyed 3 dreadnoughts before they could even leave dock. On the Federation's capital world of Elysia, a single encrypted message was sent from a human diplomat's datapad. Within hours, power outages swept through the planetary defense grid, leaving the seat of the Federation temporarily vulnerable. One by one, the dominoes fell. The Federation had an armada. Humanity had strategy. Back on Vortan 5, Kane stood on the bridge of his flagship as the Federation fleet arrived. The Sixth Armada, reduced but still formidable, emerged from warp in perfect battle formation. Their admiral, a towering reptilian named Varak Thul, hailed them. His yellow eyes burned with fury. "Human filth," he growled. "Surrender now, and we may spare some of you for labor camps. Resist, and we will erase your species from history." Kane chuckled, stepping forward. "You talk big for someone who's about to lose everything." Varak Thul sneered. "You are outnumbered. You cannot hope to defeat us." Kane simply smiled. And then, behind Varak Thul's fleet, the stars exploded. Dozens of hidden human ships, lying in wait within Vortan 5's asteroid belt, opened fire. Bombardment missiles and kinetic slugs ripped through the enemy formation. The dreadnought's shields flared under the unexpected onslaught, struggling to compensate. At the same time, within the Federation's own fleet, dozens of human sleeper agents activated. Systems shut down. Weapons locked up. Entire ships turned on their own allies. The Sixth Armada had come to crush humanity. Instead, it was being torn apart from within. Kane watched the chaos unfold and leaned in toward the comms. "I hope you enjoyed your stay in the stars," he said to Varak Thul, "because this is humanity's galaxy now." Across the Federation, fear spread like wildfire. The Ghost Fleet wasn't just a rogue group of pirates. It was an uprising. The rejected species had done the impossible. Humanity wasn't just fighting back. Humanity was winning. The battle above Vortan 5 raged like a storm, but it was no ordinary battle. It was a slaughter. The Sixth Armada had arrived with confidence, believing they were about to exterminate a nuisance. Instead, they found themselves ensnared in the jaws of a predator they never saw coming. Federation ships fired wildly into the chaos, unsure if the enemy was before them or among them. Human infiltrators had disabled key systems, turned automated defenses against their own ships, and sown such discord that even their admirals had no idea who to trust. On the Iron Revenant, Kane watched the destruction unfold with cold satisfaction. "Status?" he asked. Reyes's voice was steady, but there was an edge of triumph beneath it. 30% of their fleet is already lost. Another 15% is either disabled or compromised. Their dreadnoughts are holding, but their command structure is in shambles." Kane nodded. "Good. Make sure no one escapes." The Federation's greatest mistake had been thinking they could contain humanity. That mistake was now costing them their most powerful fleet. On the bridge of his flagship, Admiral Varak Thul's reptilian claws gripped the edges of his command throne, his yellow eyes wide with rage and disbelief. "Where is my firepower?" he snarled. "Where are my reinforcements?" A terrified officer stammered, "Sir, all reinforcements have been compromised. We are receiving conflicting orders from within our own fleet. Some ships have already surrendered, others are engaging each other." "Then retake control," Varak Thul bellowed. Before his officers could respond, the ship lurched violently. Emergency klaxons blared as explosions rippled through the lower decks. Varric Thul turned his gaze towards the viewport. What he saw made his blood run cold. The Iron Revenant was coming straight for them. The human flagship, wreathed in the fire of the dying Federation fleet, moved with terrifying precision. Railguns ignited, kinetic slugs ripping through Varric Thul's escort ships. Its fighter squadrons swarmed his defenses like a plague, picking apart whatever was left of his fleet. The humans weren't retreating, they were hunting, and Varric Thul was the prey. Kane stood at the helm of his ship, eyes locked onto the enemy flagship. "Bring us in closer," he ordered. Reyes hesitated. "Sir, if we get too close, their main cannons, they won't get the chance to fire." Kane's voice was ice. "I'm ending this now." The Iron Revenant surged forward, dodging through wreckage and fire. Federation ships tried to intercept, but human fighters carved them apart before they could get close. Varric Thul's dreadnought turned, its cannons warming up for a desperate last strike. Too late. Kane's fleet unleashed hell. Every railgun, every missile, every plasma bolt was focused on one target. The shields of Varric Thul's flagship flared and collapsed, its armored hull breaking apart under the sheer ferocity of human firepower. Explosions erupted across the ship, consuming its decks in roaring infernos. Varric Thul barely had time to curse before his command center was consumed in flames. The flagship shattered. The Federation's most powerful admiral was dead. Silence fell over the battlefield. The remaining Federation ships, those that could still fight, hesitated, and then, one by one, they surrendered. Kane exhaled slowly, watching as the once mighty 6th Armada crumbled. "Broadcast to all remaining Federation forces," he said. "The battle is over. Humanity stands victorious." Reyes nodded and sent the signal. Across the wreckage-strewn void, Federation crews dropped their weapons. Some ejected escape pods. Others simply powered down their ships, knowing they had no hope left. The battle for Vortan 5 was won. But Kane knew the real war was just beginning. In the heart of the Federation's capital, the High Council gathered in emergency session. The news from Vortan 5 had hit them like a hammer. The 6th Armada, destroyed. Varric Thul, dead. Humanity, unstoppable. Panic spread through the chamber. "We must retaliate," one counselor cried. "Destroy Earth, wipe them out before they strike again." "Wipe them out?" another scoffed. "They were supposed to be nothing. Now they're winning battles against our best fleets. If we escalate, they will burn us from within." A silence fell over the room as the realization sank in. The Federation had rejected humanity. Now, humanity was coming for them, and nothing could stop them. On Vortan 5, Kane stood on the surface, looking up at the stars. The Federation had cast humanity aside, thinking they would be forgotten. Instead, they had created their greatest enemy. "Prepare the fleet," he said quietly. This was only the beginning. The Ghost Fleet would not stop. Not until the Federation knelt before humanity. The fires of Vortan 5 still burned as humanity's forces secured the remains of the Federation fleet. Wreckage drifted in orbit, the twisted carcasses of warships that once symbolized absolute power. Now, they were just ruins, monuments to the arrogance of the species that had cast humanity aside. Kane stood on the command balcony of the Iron Revenant, watching as his officers processed the thousands of Federation prisoners. Some were wounded, some were in shock, and some simply stared at the humans with wide, disbelieving eyes. "Have they said anything?" Kane asked. Reyes shook her head. "Not much, sir. Most of them are too stunned to speak. They can't believe we actually won." Kane smirked. "Good. Let them sit with that." The Federation had spent centuries ignoring humanity, treating them like an inconvenient pest, something to be contained, dismissed, forgotten. They had never once considered that humans might fight back. And now, they had no choice but to fear them. Deep inside Vorton 5's central command hub, human engineers worked tirelessly. The planetary network was being reconfigured, its defense systems rewritten to recognize human warships as friendlies. The orbital shipyards, once reserved for Federation fleets, were now under human control. Kane strode through the corridors, his black military coat billowing behind him. This planet had been a major supply hub for the Federation. Now it would be the foundation of a new empire. Locke, his chief strategist, approached with a data slate. "We've secured their archives, Admiral. Complete fleet movements, star charts, supply chains. The Federation thought this information was untouchable." He chuckled. Turns out they were wrong. Kane took the slate and scrolled through the data. This wasn't just valuable. It was everything. The Federation's weaknesses, its hidden bases, its secret projects. Humanity now had access to it all. Reyes approached. "Sir, we've also decrypted classified communications. The Federation is in full panic mode. They're calling for reinforcements, but there's hesitation." Kane raised an eyebrow. "Hesitation?" She nodded. "Some sectors don't want to commit their forces. Word of our victory is spreading, and there are whispers of dissent. Even non-human species that have been under Federation rule are watching us." Kane grinned. "Then let's give them something to believe in." The next move wasn't war. It was propaganda. A transmission was sent across every major Federation channel. A figure in a dark coat stood in front of a burning Federation banner, his eyes cold, his voice like steel. It was Kane. "The Federation cast humanity into the void. They left us to die. They called us unworthy, insignificant. They were wrong. We have taken Vorton 5. We have shattered their armada. We have proven that humanity does not break. To those who still serve the Federation, you have a choice. Stand with the tyrants who cast you aside, or stand with us. The Ghost Fleet is rising, and soon the Federation will fall." The message was clear, and the galaxy listened. In hidden corners of Federation space, oppressed worlds stirred. Slave races who had spent centuries under the Federation's rule saw hope for the first time. Mercenaries, warlords, and exiled soldiers saw an opportunity. The Federation had spent centuries making enemies, and now humanity was offering them a reason to fight. On the Federation's capital world, the High Council's emergency chamber was filled with shouting. The broadcast had sent the entire government into disarray. "They're inciting rebellion," one councilor screamed. "This is a coordinated effort to bring down our rule." Another slammed his fist on the table. "They were nothing. Now they have warships, weapons, and allies. We should have wiped them out when we had the chance." Grand Councilor Varric, an elder of the Sithari race, stood slowly. His pale blue eyes narrowed in contemplation. "Humanity was a mistake," he said softly, "one we should have corrected long ago." Silence fell over the chamber. Varric turned to his war ministers. "Mobilize every fleet. Issue a kill order for Darius Kane and his Ghost Fleet. I don't care how many resources it takes. Humanity does not get to exist." But Kane was already steps ahead. Inside the command center of the Iron Revenant, he studied the star charts. The Federation would regroup and come at them with overwhelming force. Vorton 5 wouldn't hold forever, which meant they had to strike first. "Set course for the Halvana shipyards," Kane ordered. "It's the biggest fleet production facility in this sector. If we take it, we cripple their ability to recover." Locke grinned. "Hit them before they can hit us. Classic human strategy." Kane smirked. "It's what we do best." The Ghost Fleet moved like a shadow in the night, slipping through the darkness of space. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. They were forging an empire. And soon, the galaxy would belong to them. The Havana shipyards were one of the Federation's most fortified industrial centers, a sprawling orbital complex that produced entire fleets. It had never known war. Until now. The Iron Revenant emerged from slipspace at the edge of the system, flanked by a growing fleet of warships, some stolen from the Federation, others built in secret by humanity's exiled engineers. A force once thought impossible now drifted in the void, preparing to strike at the heart of the Federation's war machine. Kane stood on the bridge, eyes fixed on the massive structure ahead. "Status?" he asked. Reyes studied the tactical readout. "The shipyard's defenses are strong. Automated turrets, fighter squadrons, a planetary shield generator. They also have a standing fleet of 12 capital ships, but—" She hesitated. "But?" Kane prompted. Reyes exhaled. They weren't expecting an attack. Most of their crews are in rotation. Only about half their fleet is combat-ready. If we move fast, we can gut them before they react. Kane smirked. "Then we move fast." The attack began in silence. The Ghost Fleet's infiltration teams had already breached the outer communication relays, severing the shipyards from the Federation's network. When the first human warships opened fire, the defenders were blind. Railguns roared. Kinetic slugs punched through station hulls, igniting fuel lines and sending fireballs into the void. Federation officers scrambled to respond, but their fleet was in disarray. Some ships powered up too slowly, others drifted without orders, and the rest were already being boarded by human strike teams. Inside the shipyard's command center, Admiral Terrace Velnor watched the chaos unfold on her monitors. This can't be happening," she whispered. "Where is our fleet? Where is command?" A trembling officer turned to her. "Ma'am, it's them." Terrace felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. Humanity. The species they had cast out like vermin. The species they had ignored for centuries. And now they had come for revenge. Kane led the assault personally. He and his strike team stormed through the industrial corridors of the shipyard, rifles blazing. Federation engineers and security officers tried to mount a defense, but they were outmatched. The humans moved like ghosts, slipping through the shadows, cutting down resistance with brutal efficiency. Locke took cover behind a console, reloading his rifle. "We've breached the reactor core. Just say the word, and we'll send this whole place into the sun." Kane considered it. Destroying the Havana shipyards would deal a crippling blow to the Federation. But then he saw the data scrolling across his wrist console. Blueprints, designs for experimental warships, entire stockpiles of weapons that had never been deployed. A slow grin spread across his face. "Forget destroying it," Kane said. "We're taking it." On the bridge of the Iron Revenant, Reyes watched as more Federation ships surrendered. The battle had lasted less than an hour, and already the defenders were breaking. The Ghost Fleet had struck fear into their hearts. "Admiral," she said into her comms, "we have full control of the shipyards. They're ours." Kane's voice was cold, victorious. "Then let's make some warships." Days later, the galaxy trembled as the news spread. The Ghost Fleet now controlled the largest shipyard in the sector. Human engineers swarmed the station, converting Federation vessels into weapons of war. Factories that once served their enemies now built ships for humanity's empire. Across the galaxy, Federation leaders panicked. The humans weren't just surviving, they were expanding, and soon nothing would stand in their way. The stolen warships of the Havana shipyards formed the backbone of humanity's new fleet. Once loyal to the Federation, they were now refitted with human ingenuity, stronger hulls, deadlier weapons, and an AI system designed to outthink their enemies. Kane stood on the command deck of the Iron Revenant, watching as engineers finalized modifications on a dreadnought that had once been the Federation's pride. Now, it bore humanity's black insignia, a symbol of defiance against those who had cast them aside. Locke approached, arms crossed. Fleet reports are in. We've retrofitted over 24 capital ships and even more support vessels. Our numbers are still small, but with these ships we can punch way above our weight. Reyes chimed in. And the Federation knows it. They're mobilizing for a counterattack. High Council's putting out bounties on every single one of us. Kane smirked. Good. Let them waste their resources hunting shadows. Reyes hesitated. There's something else. We've been receiving transmissions from non-human species. The Federation's iron grip isn't as strong as they want us to believe. Some of their vassal races see us as a way out. They want to talk. Kane's grin faded into a thoughtful expression. The Federation had ruled for centuries through fear and control. Entire civilizations were subjugated, forced into servitude, their cultures stripped away, and now, for the first time in history, there was a new power rising. Set up the meetings, Kane said. Let's see if they want more than just words. The first to arrive were the Zalari, a reptilian species known for their brutal efficiency in combat. Once elite shock troopers for the Federation, they had grown disillusioned with their masters. Their leader, High Marshal Tovik, stood across from Kane in the war room. You fight the Federation, Tovik said, his voice a low growl. We have fought for them, killed for them, but we were never more than tools, disposable. His yellow eyes narrowed. We are done being tools. Kane leaned forward. Then fight for yourselves. Fight with us. Help us bring the Federation to its knees. Tovik studied him for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. The Zalari stand with humanity. One by one, other species followed. The Koran, former slaves turned engineers. The Veridash, a merchant race sick of Federation taxes and exploitation. Even rogue Federation officers, disillusioned by corruption, began defecting. What had started as a human rebellion was becoming a revolution. But revolutions had consequences. At the heart of the Federation's core world, the High Council convened in secrecy. The Grand Counselor's expression was grim as he read the latest reports. This cannot continue, Varric said. Humanity was meant to be forgotten. Instead, they have become a cancer. An intelligence officer stepped forward. We've located their fleet. They're massing near the Ravos expanse. If we act now, we can crush them before they grow any stronger. The counselors murmured in agreement. Varric's eyes burned with cold determination. Then we wipe them from existence. But Kane and his people had always been underestimated. On the Iron Revenant, reports flooded in. Federation forces were on the move. A massive fleet was inbound. Locke grinned. Looks like we got their attention. Kane's expression was unreadable as he stared at the star map. This would be their defining moment. Either they would be destroyed, or the Federation's reign would end forever. The Ravos expanse was a dead zone, uncharted, filled with anomalies, the kind of place no sane fleet would travel through. It was also the perfect place for an ambush. Kane stood at the center of the Iron Revenant's bridge, staring at the star map. The Federation fleet was closing in fast. Hundreds of ships, enough firepower to burn a planet to cinders. But Kane wasn't afraid. He had fought too hard, lost too much, to fear the enemy now. Status on our fleet? He asked. Reyes responded, her fingers dancing over the console. We have 70 capital ships, 3 times that in strikecraft, and nearly 100 retrofitted Federation vessels from Halvana. Zalari ground forces are ready to deploy if this turns into a boarding action. But... Kane turned to her. But what? Locke exhaled. We're outnumbered 5-1. Silence settled over the bridge. Everyone knew what that meant. The Federation wasn't just coming to win, they were coming to annihilate them. Kane's lips curled into a smirk. Then let's make them regret it. The first enemy ships dropped out of slip space at the system's edge. Scout vessels, fast attack ships, scanning for traps. They found nothing but silence, no human warships, no movement. They sent their reports back. The second wave arrived. Larger cruisers, escorts, dreadnoughts. Still nothing. Then, Varick's flagship arrived at the center of the formation. The moment it did, the void erupted in fire. From the shadows of Ravos, the Ghost Fleet struck first. Long-range railguns tore through the enemy's forward line before they could even react. Drones launched from hidden asteroids, slamming into the Federation ships with pinpoint accuracy. Zalari shock troops boarded confused enemy vessels, cutting down crews before they could man their defenses. The Federation panicked. "What's happening?" Varick snarled as his bridge shook from an impact. "Where are they attacking from?" His officer scrambled for answers. But it was chaos. The humans were fighting like no species they had ever faced before. They weren't fighting a traditional battle. They were fighting to destroy. Kane watched the battlefield unfold, his strategy playing out like a carefully orchestrated dance. "The moment they counterattack," he ordered, "pull back and let them overextend." The Ghost Fleet disappeared into the debris fields. The Federation forces, desperate to regain control, pursued. Right into the kill zone. The moment they entered the field, human warships surged from all sides. Missiles, plasma lances, kinetic strikes. Ships that had once belonged to the Federation turned their guns on their former masters. A single battle turned into a massacre. Varick watched in horror as his fleet was torn apart. This wasn't possible. This shouldn't have been possible, and yet the proof was burning all around him. Then his sensors picked up something that froze him in place. A dreadnought. No, the dreadnought. The Halvanna Leviathan. A warship that was supposed to be Federation-controlled. A ship that had once symbolized their dominance. And now? It bore the black insignia of the Ghost Fleet. "Impossible," Varick whispered, and then it fired. A lance of energy pierced his flagship, cutting through armor like it was paper. Varick was thrown to the deck as explosions ripped through his ship. He tried to stand, tried to call for reinforcements, but there was nothing left. His fleet was dying. The Federation was dying. And humanity had won. Hours later, the silence of the battlefield was deafening. Federation ships drifted, burning, abandoned. What was left of their fleet had fled. Kane stood on the bridge of the Iron Revenant, watching the wreckage float past. Locke let out a low whistle. "We did it." Reyes smirked. "We just crushed the single most powerful fleet in the galaxy." Kane exhaled. The battle had been won, but he knew this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. Humanity had proven they wouldn't be erased. Now? They would take the galaxy for themselves, and nothing would stop them. The battle at Ravos Expanse had shattered the Federation's illusion of invincibility. Word spread faster than light, across war councils, trading outposts, hidden colonies. Humanity, the species once rejected and cast into the void, had defeated the Federation's grand fleet. Entire sectors, once thought loyal to the High Council, now wavered. Some defected openly. Others simply stopped answering Federation orders. A power shift was underway. In the ruins of a Federation war council, Grand Counselor Varick sat in stunned silence. His once mighty fleet was gone, his war machine crippled. Across the chamber, his fellow counselors shouted over one another, some demanding an immediate counteroffensive, others urging peace talks. Varick slammed his fist against the table. "We do not negotiate with vermin." But the room was no longer his to control. The Federation had ruled through dominance and fear, but now They were the ones afraid. A low, rumbling voice echoed from the shadows. Perhaps it is time to consider alternative measures. The chamber fell silent. Varric turned toward the voice. A figure stood at the edge of the room, one of the old guard, the secret architects of the Federation's darker dealings. The humans have proven they cannot be crushed conventionally, the figure continued. But brute force is not the only way to kill an empire. If they wish to be rulers of the shadows. A slow, cruel smile spread across his face. Let's remind them what lurks in the dark. Meanwhile, in the depths of Ravos' expanse, Kane stood aboard the Iron Revenant, staring at a holographic map of the galaxy. The Federation was wounded, but it wasn't dead. Not yet. Locke leaned against the console, arms crossed. We got their attention, that's for sure, but we both know they're not just going to roll over. Kane nodded. Number, they'll come at us harder, smarter. We have to be ready. Reyes spoke up. Then maybe it's time we stop reacting. Kane turned to her, curious. Reyes smirked. The Federation built its empire by subjugating others. What if we built ours by liberating them? The room fell silent as the weight of her words settled in. Humanity had spent centuries surviving in the shadows, fighting just to exist. But now, they weren't just fighting for themselves. They had allies. They had a fleet. They had the power to change the galaxy itself. Kane looked out the viewport, where the remnants of the Federation fleet still smoldered in the distance. He could see it now. Planets rising against their oppressors, entire species rallying under a new banner. Humanity's banner. Then we take the fight to them, Kane said. No more waiting, no more hiding. He turned to his officers, a slow, determined grin spreading across his face. We're not just here to survive anymore. He tapped the holographic map, marking the first target. We're here to conquer. And so it began. The Federation had cast humanity into the void. They had rejected them, abandoned them, tried to erase them, but humanity had survived. And now they would rule. The Ghost Empire had risen, and the galaxy would never be the same. The vastness of space was home to many civilizations, each with its own unique strengths, technologies, and philosophies. The Galactic Concord, a coalition of the most advanced species in the universe, prided itself on its ability to assess and categorize every known race. They had conquered or assimilated countless planets, their fleets moving like unstoppable forces through the void. Then they met humanity. At first, humans were nothing more than another species to classify. They were an anomaly, an upstart civilization that had clawed its way out of its own planet's gravity, well using primitive chemical rockets before advancing to fusion-powered vessels. Their ships were not as sleek as the Kalari. They lacked the organic technology of the Var. They did not have the psionic capabilities of the Eldrin. Yet there was something about human warships that disturbed the Concord's analysts. The first encounter was with the hegemony of Trinax, a species known for its meticulous data collection. Their intelligence arm had always boasted of its ability to scan any ship, no matter how well it was shielded. They believed knowledge was power, and so when they encountered the first Terran warship, the TNS Dauntless, they immediately activated their deep space scanners. What they found changed everything. The ship's exterior was standard enough, composed of advanced alloys and shielded against most known forms of attack. But when the scanners attempted to penetrate deeper, they encountered something that had never been seen before. The data coming back was wrong. The readings fluctuated wildly. The ship's core registered as a fusion reactor one moment, an antimatter drive the next. The weapon systems seemed to phase in and out of known classifications, sometimes appearing as railguns, then energy cannons, then something entirely unidentifiable. More disturbingly, certain sections of the ship were black holes of information, as if the scanner's very signals were being devoured. Then, the Trinax scanners shut down entirely. Not just the ones scanning the ship. All of them. Across the hegemony's intelligence networks, deep space sensors went offline. The Trinax researchers monitoring the scan screamed in agony as their implants overloaded. Some suffered immediate neural failure, collapsing at their stations. Others clawed at their own faces, muttering incoherently about the whispers in the code. It took weeks to restore the Trinax systems, and when they did, they issued an unprecedented order. No Trinax vessel, under any circumstances, was to attempt scanning a human warship ever again. The Concord dismissed this as an anomaly, until it happened again. And again. The Solari, a race known for their organic computers and hyper-advanced bioengineering, attempted to decipher what was happening inside a Terran dreadnought. Their scanning tendrils, living organisms themselves, shriveled and died upon contact with the ship's energy signature. The Eldrin, whose psychic abilities could normally read the thoughts of entire planets, sent their most gifted minds to probe a human battlecruiser. They came back shattered, their minds reduced to gibbering wrecks, muttering about the screaming void inside the ship. Even the Dixari, who could predict the future with near-perfect accuracy, found that whenever they attempted to foresee the outcome of a battle involving human warships, their visions turned to static. They saw nothing. Or worse, they saw themselves already dead, long before the first shot was fired. The final straw came when the Galactic Concord's ruling council attempted to force a full-scale analysis. They sent a combined fleet, equipped with the most advanced scanning arrays in existence, to surround a single human battleship, the TNS Harbinger. What happened next was never publicly disclosed. What is known is that none of those ships ever returned. No distress signals, no debris, no explanation, just gone. After that, the Concord made an official decree. No species, no matter how advanced, shall ever attempt to scan a Terran warship again. Because whatever was inside those ships was not meant to be understood. The Galactic Concord tried to suppress the growing fear surrounding human warships, but the truth had already begun to spread in whispers and fragmented data logs. Across the universe, scientists, tacticians, and spies speculated about what had gone so horribly wrong for those who had attempted to scan a Terran vessel. Some theorized that humanity had developed a form of quantum encryption so advanced that it scrambled the very perception of those who attempted to decipher it. Others believed the ships were shielded by some form of exotic matter that defied known physics. But the most unsettling theory came from the Eldrin, the most powerful telepaths in the galaxy, who had barely survived their attempt to probe human vessels. They claimed that human warships were not just machines. They were aware. The idea was dismissed by the more scientifically minded members of the Concord, but those who had encountered Terran ships firsthand knew better. There was something about the way they moved, how they responded to threats, how they always seemed to be just one step ahead of their enemies. It was as if the ships themselves were watching, calculating, waiting. One race, the daring and reckless Var, decided they would uncover the truth. Unlike the more cautious species of the Concord, the Var were warriors first and scientists second. Their empire was built on conquest, and they had yet to meet an enemy they could not dominate. They gathered a fleet, one of the largest ever assembled, and launched an assault on a Terran stronghold. At the heart of their target was a single human battleship, the TNS Oblivion. By all logic, the fight should have been an easy one. The Var fleet outnumbered the lone Terran ship 100 to 1. Their weapons were among the most devastating in the galaxy. Their commanders were seasoned veterans who had conquered countless systems. But the moment they engaged, something went terribly wrong. The Oblivion didn't move like a normal warship. It weaved through space with an unnatural fluidity, as though it could see the future, dodging barrages before they were even fired. The VAR's targeting systems malfunctioned, locking onto empty space, or, even worse, their own allies. Then came the communications breakdown. The fleet's admirals barked orders, but their voices came back to them twisted, distorted, as if something was speaking through them. Some heard their own voices whispering, "Run." Others heard nothing at all but the deafening silence of the void. And then the screaming started. It didn't come from their enemies. It came from their own crews. Soldiers, pilots, tacticians, entire decks filled with warriors suddenly collapsing, clutching their heads, their eyes rolling back as they convulsed on the floor. No weapons had touched them. No visible force had struck their ships. Yet they were dying all the same, their minds unraveling from something unseen. One captain, before his ship was torn apart by an invisible force, managed to send out a single message to the VAR homeworld. His final words were recorded, analyzed, and eventually buried by the conquered. It was just one sentence. "The ship is looking at me." When the battle was over, only the Oblivion remained. There was no wreckage, no debris, just silence. The mighty VAR fleet had been erased, as if it had never existed. From that day forward, the VAR, once the most feared conquerors in the galaxy, refused to speak of the battle. No records were kept, no survivors were found. The entire event became nothing more than a ghost story, passed in hushed voices among those who still dared to wonder what lay within the heart of a Terran warship. But one truth became undeniable. Even the bravest, the strongest, and the smartest aliens in the universe refused to scan a human warship ever again. The fear surrounding human warships grew, but it was more than just fear. It was a warning etched into the minds of those who had dared to seek answers and suffered for it. Entire civilizations had learned to avert their sensors when encountering a Terran vessel, treating them like cosmic anomalies best left undisturbed. And yet, there was always someone who refused to listen. The Zelnari, an ancient and arrogant species, considered themselves the pinnacle of intelligence. Their race had mastered reality-warping technologies, bending time and space at their will. Their minds functioned on a level so advanced that they viewed most other species as mere children fumbling in the dark. They had no love for the galactic conquered. To them, fear was the symptom of a lesser mind. Where the conquered saw danger, the Zelnari saw opportunity. So when the legends of human warships reached them, they did not hesitate. They had never encountered humans directly, never faced them in war or diplomacy. To them, Terrans were simply a primitive species that had stumbled upon something remarkable, something they had no right to possess. The Zelnari believed that whatever technology powered human warships could be stolen and understood. And so, the Zelnari High Council authorized Project Eclipse. A single, ultra-advanced research vessel was dispatched under the guise of neutrality. It bore no weapons, only the most powerful scanning equipment ever devised, capable of breaking through any defense, any deception. It could peer into the fabric of reality itself, uncovering the most hidden of truths. Their target? The TNS Eclipse, a Terran dreadnought patrolling the outskirts of human-controlled space. The Zelnari ship kept its distance, careful not to provoke a response. It did not engage in combat. It did not transmit a signal. It simply observed. At first, all seemed well. Their instruments captured normal readings, hull composition, heat signatures, gravitational distortions. But when they activated their deep core scanners, something unexpected happened. The Eclipse turned. Not in an evasive maneuver, not to change course. It turned to face them. There was no possible way the human crew could have known they were being scanned. The Zelnari technology was undetectable, existing outside the normal dimensions of perception. And yet, the moment their scanners activated, the ship looked directly at them. A silence fell over the research team. Every Zelnari aboard felt something primal, an instinct they had not experienced in thousands of years. Dread. The lead scientist, a being who had mapped the very veins of time itself, hesitated. He did not understand why, but he could not bring himself to continue. His fingers hovered over the controls, paralyzed by something he could not name. Then the ship's systems began to fail. One by one, their instruments flickered and died. Their scanners, their shields, even their life support. All of it went dark. Panic spread across the crew as they scrambled to diagnose the failure, but there was no malfunction, no attack. Something was inside their ship, not a physical entity, not a cybernetic intrusion. Something was watching them. The lead scientist gasped as his vision blurred. He was no longer in his lab, no longer aboard his own ship. He was somewhere else. He stood in an infinite void, surrounded by whispers that had no source. Shapes shifted in the darkness, eyes forming and unforming, gazing upon him with something that was not curiosity, but judgment. The whispers turned to voices. He understood none of the words, but the meaning pierced his mind. "Do not look." The scientist screamed, collapsing as his consciousness snapped back into his body. He was lying on the cold metal floor of the Zelnari research vessel, gasping for breath. Around him, his crew was motionless, unmoving, dead. Their eyes were open, their mouths locked in silent screams. The Eclipse did nothing. It did not fire a single shot. It merely turned away, as if disinterested. By the time the Zelnari ship was discovered, drifting lifelessly in space, no one was left alive to explain what had happened. The data logs were corrupted beyond repair. The Zelnari High Council attempted to cover up the disaster, erasing all records of Project Eclipse. But whispers spread. Rumors, fears. Even among the most arrogant race in the galaxy, the message was clear: do not scan human warships. Because some knowledge was never meant to be known. The incident with the Zelnari sent shockwaves through the galactic Concord. If even they, beings who had mastered space, time, and the very essence of knowledge, could not comprehend what lay inside a human warship, then perhaps the truth was never meant to be uncovered. Fear turned to silence. Silence turned to avoidance. For decades, no species dared to scan a Terran vessel. Encounters with the Terran Navy were brief, often ending with alien ships altering their course without a word. The Concord, once determined to classify every race in the galaxy, quietly removed humanity from their records. But some still sought answers. The Drellic were a species of archivists, historians, and seekers of lost knowledge. Unlike the Concord's conquerors, the Drellic did not desire war or control. They simply wished to understand. To them, the mystery of humanity was the most enticing puzzle in the universe. And so one final attempt was made. A single Drellic scout ship, the Seeker's Gift, was sent to shadow a Terran fleet. They did not intend to scan the ships directly, only to record their movements, analyze their energy output, and decipher any patterns that could explain what had driven so many others to madness. For weeks, they followed in secret. The human fleet did not acknowledge them, did not show any sign of aggression. It was as if they did not care about the tiny, insignificant ship watching from the shadows. Then one day, without warning, the Terran flagship, TNS Omen, came to a dead stop. The rest of the fleet continued its course, but the Omen remained motionless, watching. The Drellic crew hesitated. They had not scanned the ship. They had done nothing to provoke a response. So why did it feel like the Omen had suddenly noticed them? Aboard the Seeker's Gift, an uneasy tension filled the air. The ship's captain, a veteran explorer named Kethril, debated whether they should turn back. The mission had been successful. Recording human fleet movements was an achievement in itself, but curiosity had been the driving force of Drellic evolution. And so, against his better judgment, Kethril issued the order. One scan. Passive only, just enough to understand why it stopped. The order was carried out. The ship's sensors reached out, gently, carefully, as if trying not to disturb something sleeping. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then every screen on the Seeker's Gift went dark. The ship shook violently, as if something had grabbed it. Instruments exploded in bursts of fire and static. The crew screamed as the ship's artificial gravity inverted, sending bodies crashing into the ceiling. And then, the voices began. Not through the ship's speakers, inside their minds. They were not words. They were thoughts, memories, not their own. They saw fire and steel, a war that stretched across the stars. They felt rage, a fury so deep it turned worlds to ash. They saw shadows, not cast by light, but by something far worse, something watching from the void. Kethril fell to his knees, clutching his skull as the visions threatened to shatter his mind. His crew was weeping, screaming, whispering things that made no sense. Through the chaos, a single message cut through the noise, a voice, vast and ancient. It was not human, but it spoke with humanity's fury. You were warned, and then silence. The Seeker's Gift reappeared on the edge of conquered space days later, drifting aimlessly. Every member of the crew was alive, but changed. Kethril never spoke again. His once brilliant mind had been hollowed out, leaving behind only an empty, haunted stare. The others told stories that made no sense, rambling nonsense about something waiting in the dark, about human warships being more than machines, about a force that even the Concord feared to name. The Drellic High Council sealed the records. From that day forward, the last race brave enough to seek the truth joined the rest of the galaxy in silent agreement. No species, no matter how intelligent, no matter how advanced, would ever scan a human warship again. Not because they feared humanity, but because they feared what humanity had found. The galaxy fell into a quiet, uneasy acceptance. The truth was never spoken aloud, but it was understood by all. No one scanned a human warship, not the most advanced species, not the most reckless empires, not even the ones who had built their legacies on uncovering the unknown. Yet, in the darkness of the void, there were always those who refused to heed the warnings. The Cesari were one such race. Unlike the Zelnari, who sought to control knowledge, or the Drellic, who sought to understand it, the Cesari were a species of shadows, smugglers, data thieves, and black market warlords. To them, information was currency, and secrets were the most valuable treasure of all. They had heard the legends of Terran warships. They had seen the Concord's silence, the way even the most powerful empires refused to speak of what lurked within those hulking vessels, and that silence only made them want the truth more. In the lawless depths of uncharted space, where no treaties held sway and no fleets patrolled, the Cesari set their trap. A dead system, a faked distress signal, and a stolen cargo hauler rigged to scan anything that approached. It was a simple plan. Lure a human warship close, activate their scanners the moment it arrived, and transmit the data back to a hidden relay station before anyone could stop them. The moment the information was secured, the warlords would sell it to the highest bidder. A Cesare named Creel commanded the operation. He was no fool. He had heard the stories. But he did not believe in ghosts, curses, or anything beyond cold, hard reality. Everyone else was weak, he told his crew. They scanned human ships and panicked, but we will see the truth. The trap was set. The bait was perfect, and the humans came. A single Terran destroyer, the TNS Revenant, emerged from hyperspace in response to the distress signal. It was smaller than the other warships spoken of in hushed whispers. No dreadnought, no monstrous titan of war. But something felt wrong. Even from a distance, Creel sensed it. Something in his bones itched, like a silent alarm going off inside his mind. "Scan it," he ordered, pushing the thought away. His crew hesitated for only a moment before obeying. The scanners flared to life. And then, nothing. No alarms, no screams, no sudden failures. The ship's instruments worked perfectly. Creel exhaled in relief. "See? All nonsense. We have the data. Now we—" Then he saw the readings. There was nothing. No heat signatures, no energy output, no matter displacement. It was not possible. A ship could not exist in real space without registering something. Even cloaked vessels left behind gravitational distortions. Even the most advanced stealth technology could not erase a ship from existence. And yet, according to the scanners, the Revenant was not there. Creel's stomach twisted as a terrible realization crawled up his spine. It had let them scan it. For the first time in galactic history, a human warship had allowed itself to be observed. Not because the Cesare were smarter, not because they had outwitted some unknowable force, because the Revenant wanted them to see. The ship's lights flickered. Not the Revenant's, their own. The hum of the ship's engines stuttered. Creel grabbed the console as the air grew heavy. His lungs struggled to pull in breath, like the atmosphere had thickened into something wrong. The rest of his crew staggered, some collapsing as their bodies trembled violently. The ship was speaking. Not in words, not in code, in memories. Creel's vision twisted. He was no longer on his bridge, no longer aboard his ship. He was elsewhere, a battlefield, a world burned to blackened cinders, a fleet shattered to drifting corpses. And the warships, they were not machines. They never were. Something had been left behind in the aftermath of humanity's greatest war. Something that should have died. Something that had no place in the natural order of things. And yet, it endured. It had been given form, a body of metal, engines, and guns. But at its core, in the very bones of its being, it was not a warship. It was a grave. And something inside had never stopped screaming. Creel collapsed, vomiting as the vision ended. His body felt wrong, like his mind had brushed against something it was never meant to comprehend. He clawed at his console, desperately trying to shut down the transmission, to wipe the data. Too late. The Revenant moved. Not forward. Not back. It flickered. One moment it was before them. The next, inside their ship. The walls bled data. Screens turned to static. Crew members screamed as their eyes turned black, as their bodies locked in place, as their voices failed them. Creel saw the numbers on his console counting down. Data transmission complete. The information had been sent. To where? Creel did not know. He never would. The Revenant spoke one final time, a whisper that was not human. "Your debt is paid." Then there was nothing, no ship, no Cesare, no debris, only silence. The message the Cesare had stolen, the data they had fought so hard to uncover, was never found. But across the galaxy, in the depths of forgotten systems where warships drifted in unmarked graves. Some began to wake. The silence that followed the Cisari incident was different. Before, species avoided scanning human warships out of fear. Now they avoided them out of understanding. Something ancient had been disturbed. Something that had never been meant to be seen. For centuries, the galactic conquered had believed itself to be the ruling power of the cosmos. They had mapped the stars, catalogued the species, built empires that stretched across hundreds of systems. But there were things in the void that had never been written in their records, because the ones who tried to record them never returned. The forgotten war. The pieces were scattered, but now some had begun putting them together. Across hidden archives, ancient reports whispered of humanity's great war, a conflict fought not against another empire, but against something else. It had been brief, violent. The humans had fought alone, no species had come to their aid, and then, silence. The war ended. The humans survived. And no one ever spoke of what exactly they had survived against. At first, the conquered had believed humanity had simply won, destroying their enemy so completely that history had erased them. But the truth was so much worse. The whispering ships, something changed in the years following the Cisari's disappearance. Across the stars, Terran warships began moving in ways that defied reason. They appeared in systems with no record of departure. They drifted through battlefields that no longer existed. Some were seen hovering over ancient ruins that had been dead for millennia, their weapons powered but never firing. And then there were the whispers. Reports from cargo pilots, station workers, even criminals in the outer rings all spoke of the same thing. They would be in their ships, minding their business. And then, the static would come. A brief flicker over their comms. A burst of noise through their instruments. Not a distress signal, not a message, something else. A voice, not words, not even thoughts, but a presence. Something watching, something remembering. Most ignored it. Others panicked, abandoning their ships in terror. But some, the ones who had fought wars, the ones who had killed before, they understood it. It was not a threat, it was a warning, and one by one the oldest warriors of the galaxy began to leave the front lines. They resigned from their fleets, they abandoned their titles, some fled into exile. Not because they feared the humans, but because they feared what the humans had locked away, and what would happen if it ever got out. The Galactic Conquered held an emergency session. The evidence was undeniable. The humans had been hiding something from their war, something that should never have been disturbed. But now, the secret had leaked. The Cisari had sent a transmission before they vanished. No one knew where it had gone, but someone, somewhere, had received it. And if they ever opened it... The Conquered made their decision. The first sealed order. A command that all members were required to follow, no matter their allegiance, no matter their standing. No species would attempt to scan, track, or research human warships ever again. Any fleet, any scientist, any individual who attempted to uncover the truth would be erased, not by the humans, but by themselves. Because there were things in the dark that even the most powerful empires could not fight, and whatever humanity had buried in their warships was never meant to be woken up. In a forgotten corner of the galaxy, in a nameless station long abandoned by the Conquered, a single console flickered to life. A signal. A transmission that had taken years to arrive. The last remnants of data stolen by the Cisari, now decrypted. On the screen, the message displayed only one thing. Coordinates, and far, far away, in the void where no stars shone. Something opened its eyes. The coordinates led to a place that should not have existed. A sector unmarked on any galactic chart. A void of absolute darkness, where sensors refused to function, where even the most advanced starships experienced unexplained malfunctions. The Conquered had erased all records of this place long ago, but now something had called it back into existence. A lone ship, small and unmarked, drifted towards the coordinates. It did not belong to any official fleet. It bore no insignia, no transponder codes. It had been stolen from a dozen different sources, assembled in the shadows by those who did not fear the warnings. Inside, a single figure watched as the void grew darker. Her name was Vena. She had spent the last decade hunting the truth. The fall of the Cesari, the whispers in the void, the ships that should not exist. It all led here. She was no fool. She knew the legends. The Conquered's first sealed order, the unspoken law of the galaxy. But Vena did not care for fear. She cared for knowledge, and so she followed the trail. As her ship neared the coordinates, her instruments died. The engines faltered. The artificial gravity flickered. The ship refused to move forward. It was as if the void itself had denied her entry. Vena exhaled sharply, reaching for the manual override. Then she saw it. A ship. Number A Grave. It was massive, far larger than the warships spoken of in the legends. A dreadnought the size of a city, but wrong. It drifted with no power, no lights, no movement. Yet Vena could feel it. A cold weight in her mind, pressing against her thoughts like fingernails scraping against bone. She had always believed warships were just machines. This was not a machine. It was a corpse, and something inside it was still awake. Her hands trembled, but she activated the scanners. A single scan. That was all she needed. The readings flooded in, data unlike anything recorded before. The ship was not built by humans. It was built from them. Not just their metals, not just their technology, their very essence. The walls were lined with something organic. The framework pulsed faintly, as if it were breathing. Then the data feed corrupted. The words on the screen twisted into something unreadable, flickering between languages. None of them known. And then a sound, not over the comms, inside her mind, a whisper, ancient and hollow. "You have seen too much." Vena gasped, staggering backward as her vision fractured. She saw flashes, a war long forgotten, ships burning, planets screaming, a terrible mistake, and the thing humanity had created to end it. The first warships, not machines, not tools of destruction, they had been seals, cages for something that had no name. Humanity had not survived their war. They had buried it, locked it away inside these husks of metal and flesh, imprisoned by weapons that were never meant to be unleashed. And now, because of her, because of the Cesari, because of those who refused to listen. One of them had woken up. Vena's breath came in ragged gasps as she stumbled toward the escape pod. Her ship was already dying. The systems were not failing. They were being devoured. Something inside the dreadnought had reached out. It had tasted her presence. And now it was hungry. Vena barely made it to the pod before the hull behind her melted away. Not by fire, not by weapons, but by something that had no shape. She launched herself into the void just as the ship was consumed. Her last sight before the pod's systems kicked in was the dreadnought, once silent, now shifting. Its darkened hull flickered. A glow, a heartbeat. It was waking up, and the void would never be silent again. Vena's escape pod tumbled through the void, spinning wildly, systems barely functional. She struggled to breathe, her mind still echoing with the whispers. The terrible knowledge she was never meant to have. She had done it. She had uncovered humanity's secret, and now the entire galaxy was in danger. Her pod's comms were barely working, but she forced them online. The transmission beacon was weak. but she did not care. She had to warn them, the conquered, the fringe colonies, the humans themselves. She had woken something up, and it would not be satisfied with just her. Fingers shaking, she typed out a simple message, a distress signal that would be picked up by anyone listening. Only 3 words. "It is awake." Then silence. The message spread like wildfire. The conquered scrambled, fleets were mobilized, emergency councils convened, the sealed order had been broken. And humanity? They did not speak. They did not issue a response. They did not deny or confirm. They simply moved. For the first time in centuries, every human warship, every silent, drifting relic, changed course. They converged toward one point, the place Vena had found. And across the galaxy, those who had once feared humanity's war machines now realized the terrible truth. They had never been warships. They had been prison guards. And now, their prisoners were stirring. Vena never made it back to civilization. Her escape pod was found days later, floating lifelessly near the conquered border. No damage, no forced entry. She was simply gone. Only her data logs remained intact, repeating the same message over and over. "It is awake." By then it was already too late, because across the void, in the deepest corners of space, something began to move. The Lost War was not over. It had only been sleeping. And now, it was time to finish what had been started.